The silence screams loudest in palaces, it echoes in the long corridors, bounces off priceless artwork, and settles like dust on the gilded cages of royal life. Today, that silence was about to shatter, broken by a single gunshot and the confession of a child. But it started, as these things often do, with the seemingly mundane. Sergeant Elias Trenmore, a man carved from granite and duty, stood his post in the north garden of Windsor Castle. 15 years in the Coldstream, guards had honed him into a silent sentinel, a master of observation. He wasn't there for pomp and circumstance. He was there to protect. So when Princess Charlotte, a wisp of a girl carrying the weight of the world on her small shoulders, walked past, something felt wrong. It wasn't the fact that she was alone. Young royals often roamed the grounds. It was the way she moved, a tense stillness that betrayed a turmoil raging beneath the surface. Her small hand clutched a satchel as if it were a lifeline. Elias, trained to notice the imperceptible, saw the fear etched in her eyes, a fear far too profound for a child her age. He greeted her with the practiced warmth expected of a royal guard, but she didn't respond. Her gaze darted around, avoiding his, searching for an escape that didn't exist within the castle walls. Then her knees buckled. Not a dramatic fall, but a surrender. A silent plea for help that resonated with Elias's very core. Protocol be damned. He took a step forward, closing the distance between soldier and child, offering a silent promise of protection. And then, in a whisper so faint he almost missed it, Charlotte spoke. "Please don't let him near me." Those words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken horror. Elias knew, in that instant, that this was not a childish squabble. This was a cry for help, a desperate confession of something unspeakable. Children don't use the word again unless the nightmare has already happened. A cold rage settled within him, a primal instinct to protect the innocent. He knelt, bringing himself to her level, his voice a calm anchor in her storm. "You're all right. No one will come near you here." Her eyes, wide with a fear that belied her age, flickered with a flicker of something akin to hope. He's done things," she stammered, the words ripped from a place of pain. Elias remained impassive, his face a mask of controlled composure. Any flicker of emotion could shut her down, send her back into the suffocating silence. "Is the person who hurt you here today?" he asked, his voice steady. A tiny nod, barely perceptible, confirmed his worst fears. And then, a voice shattered the fragile moment of trust. "Mom, your grandmother is expecting you." One of Charlotte's aides, oblivious to the drama unfolding, approached with a clipboard and a smile. Charlotte recoiled, her fear exploding into a desperate plea. No, don't tell her. She tells Camilla everything." The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. Concealment, betrayal. A conspiracy of silence orchestrated by those who should have been her protectors. Elias felt a cold fury rise within him. This wasn't just a breach of protocol, it was a betrayal of innocence. 2 taps on his radio, a silent distress signal, alerted security to a safeguarding breach involving a minor royal. He stood tall, a wall of red and black, shielding Charlotte from the approaching danger. He knew then, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that this was not the beginning. This was the moment she finally broke, and whatever had been done to her was about to walk through the courtyard gates. The measured click of leather on stone grew louder. Elias recognized the sound. Thomas Parker Bowles, late 42nds, impeccably groomed, radiating an arrogance that only comes from generations of privilege. The black coat slung over his shoulder, the crisp collar, it all screamed control. But the moment his eyes landed on Charlotte, something shifted. Not concern, not warmth, just a possessive claim. "There you are, sweetheart," he said, his voice dripping with false affection. "We have to finish our little talk." Charlotte's reaction was instinctive, a subtle retreat into Elias's shadow, a reflex born of fear, a learned response to the predator approaching. Elias stepped forward, a silent barrier between the girl and the man. Thomas slowed, his eyebrows arching in mock surprise. "She's been a little dramatic this morning." He chuckled as if dismissing a child's tantrum. "It's nothing serious, family stuff." He took another step. Elias didn't yield. Charlotte's voice, a fragile thread of sound, cracked through the forced civility. "Please don't." That stopped Thomas cold. Not the words themselves, but the raw, broken quality. "Sir," Elias said, his voice calm but firm, "you've not been cleared to interact with the princess at this time." Thomas scoffed, running a hand through his perfectly coiffed hair. Oh, don't start with the protocol. She's my niece. You are not her guardian, Elias countered, the steel in his voice now unmistakable. Thomas rolled his eyes. Don't make this dramatic. You're in uniform. You know how it looks when you overstep. Let's just get her where she needs to be, and we'll all pretend this moment didn't happen. He tried to move past Elias. The guard blocked him, shoulder to shoulder. The message was clear. This wasn't a misunderstanding, and Elias wasn't backing down. Thomas hesitated, a flicker of surprise crossing his face that anyone dared defy him in public. All right, enough, he muttered, still trying to maintain a veneer of civility. You've had your fun standing tall, but we need to go now. He reached for Charlotte, his movements slow but deliberate, the entitlement oozing from every pore. Charlotte flinched, her satchel nearly slipping from her grasp. She stumbled back, pressing herself against the cold stone wall, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Elias shifted, a subtle movement, but all it took. His gloved hand rose, resting deliberately on the strap of his rifle, a silent warning. I have not raised my weapon, but don't make me, Thomas noticed. He dropped his hand, his face tightening with barely concealed fury. You've got to be kidding me, he hissed. She's lying again. Ask Camilla. She makes up stories when she's upset. A choked sob escaped Charlotte's lips. The accusation, the casual dismissal of her pain, was a blow more devastating than any physical assault. Elias's voice was now a command. Sir, remove yourself from the miner's space immediately. Thomas stepped forward, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. She asked for it last time. She wasn't complaining. And then Charlotte shattered. Not a scream, but a silent implosion. A sob that tore from the depths of her soul. Her body shook uncontrollably, her satchel falling to the ground with a soft thud. Elias moved, his actions decisive. He stepped directly into Thomas's path, blocking him completely. His posture shifted, the subtle but unmistakable stance of a soldier ready for combat. He tapped his radio clasp, marking the moment the threat became active. You're overreacting, Thomas snarled, his eyes narrowed. Elias's gaze was unwavering. Try me. The tension was palpable, the air thick with unspoken menace. Then, Thomas lunged, his hand shooting past Elias, reaching for Charlotte. Elias didn't hesitate. He calculated the trajectory, the backstop, the angle, years of training distilled into a single, critical moment. His rifle came off his shoulder in a smooth, practiced motion, and before Thomas could touch her, Elias fired. Not at Thomas. Into the stone wall, 2 meters to his left. The sound was deafening, a thunderous explosion that ripped through the courtyard, sending pigeons scattering into the sky. Dust and fragments of stone rained down. Thomas crumpled, his hands flying to his head, a silent scream contorting his face. Charlotte was a trembling heap on the ground, her hands clamped over her ears. Elias stood his ground, rifle angled downward, his voice cutting through the chaos. Do not move toward the princess again. You shot at me, Thomas sputtered, scrambling backward on the flagstones. You tried to kill me. Elias remained unmoved. The shot was surgical, calculated to intimidate, not to harm. The palace's ballistic training protocols were etched into his muscle memory. He'd aimed for the reinforced stone, a designated safe discharge point. It was a demonstration of force, a promise of what he was capable of, should Thomas persist. He's insane. He's unhinged. Thomas shrieked, stumbling to his feet and pointing a trembling finger. Camilla will bury you for this. Charlotte, still huddled on the ground, lifted her head. Tears streamed down her face, but her voice, though small, was clear. No, he saved. The words hung in the air, silencing even Thomas's frantic accusation. Elias didn't turn, didn't acknowledge her directly. His focus remained locked on the man who posed a threat. The shot had been fired, the line had been crossed, and now the machinery of Windsor would grind into motion. And it did. Before the echo of the gunshot had fully dissipated, the palace's security apparatus sprang to life. Boots pounded on stone, doors crashed open, and a cacophony of radio chatter filled the air. A royal security officer, halfway through his lunch in the south wing, dropped his sandwich and sprinted north, adrenaline surging through his veins. Elias stood firm, his posture square, the rifle still angled downward. This was no longer a ceremonial performance. This was protection, plain and simple. 3 royal security officers converged on the scene within seconds. One immediately knelt to assess Charlotte, his movements practiced and gentle. Another approached Elias, his hand open but his eyes alert. Elias didn't resist. He identified himself, stating his rank, name, and the location. He reported the discharge, the reason, and the safeguard code. Warning shot, he stated, his voice steady. Non-lethal trajectory. Fired to prevent unlawful contact with a royal minor after repeated verbal commands failed. The officers exchanged a brief glance, acknowledging the situation without judgment. They understood the gravity of what had transpired. Then, a voice ripped through the stunned silence, sharp and imperious. What the hell happened? Queen Camilla stormed into the courtyard, a whirlwind of fury and aristocratic entitlement. Her black coat billowed behind her, and the silver brooch on her chest flashed in the sunlight. She didn't spare a glance for Elias. Her eyes were fixed on her son, crumpled and disheveled on the ground. "You fired at my son?" she raged, her voice trembling with outrage. "Have you completely lost your mind? You're finished, stripped of your uniform, arrested. You don't touch your weapon around a royal without cause." Elias remained calm, his voice unwavering. The princess was in distress. She confirmed prior abuse. The shot was lawful. Camilla's face contorted with fury. "She lies. She's been lying for weeks. Every time she doesn't want to follow orders, she invents something." And then Charlotte spoke again, her voice cutting through Camilla's tirade. "No, I'm not lying." Camilla froze, her eyes snapping to Charlotte. In full view of the assembled staff and security personnel, she turned on the child. "You ungrateful little brat. After everything we've done to protect you." She reached for Charlotte's wrist, her grip tight. Charlotte recoiled, yanking her arm away and screaming, "Don't touch me!" The scream echoed through the courtyard, louder than the gunshot. It was a primal cry of fear and defiance, a shattering of the carefully constructed facade of royal composure. Camilla went still, not because of the words, but because of the shift in the atmosphere. The air itself had changed. Everyone saw it now. The truth, raw and undeniable, hung in the air, and no one came to Camilla's defense.